they they don't have those coffee dispensers anymore. I think cleaning them out because one of them was broken yesterday, and so they just have the coffee uncovered in little plastic boxes.
Oh my God.
All toppers.
Oh my
Rock.
gosh. What a blasphemous situation.
I know, so I'm saying the Turkish is very, very stale right now.
Stale Turkish coffee.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I found in my book.
Really cheap experience. Wow.
There's the author of our mimer.
Yeah.
Such a nice smile. Oh,
Yeah,
there's
that's
another one. There you go. There's another one.
You just have them on your favorite pages?
No, they're just in there. I don't know where they came from. I'm sort of surprised, but there they are. Oh, need some warm weather to get rid of this cough.
It's coming soon, Bezrat Hashem. Next week we're supposed to have days in the high 60s.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
What's that? Like
So 20.
18? 20?
Yeah.
20?
High 60s Celsius would not be pleasant.
Hmm?
I said high 60s Celsius would definitely not be
No,
pleasant.
that would. The highest I ever remember was we were in Miluim in Yotfata. Yotfata is about 20, 30 kilometers north of Eilat.
Okay.
There's a base there. There's a kibbutz and a base. And it was Shavuos time. It was 45 degrees. And now it's just really hot. It's Yad Soledah's Bay, right?
Yeah.
That's called Yad Soledah's Bay is 45.2 degrees. Right? I mean, when you walked, the air burnt your face because you were making a little bit of wind. And there was no, the shower was just a tank on the roof. So in the winter, the shower is freezing. And not freezing because it's always warm down there. But in the summer, so it's boiling water.
Yeah.
So you'd have to empty out half the tank, let it fill up, and then you could take a shower. So you just wasted all this water, but I mean, there was nothing you could do about it. You couldn't take a shower in burning water, right? So, and you do like taking showers when you're eating dust and mud all day. But it was definitely an interesting little beautiful area. And the kibbutz next door makes the famous Yotfata milk products. They're all over. It used to be Strauss, I don't know what they are anymore. But they have yogurts and shakes and milk. So in those days, they didn't have a good hefsher mitzvah and chalav Yisrael. But they would bring plates of yogurts and shakes and anything the guys wanted. Every morning they would bring them. Someone would just walk over from the kibbutz. There was a path to the base. They just walk over, put them down in the dining room, and walk back to the kibbutz. So the milk was fine. I mean, I could drink the milk. The other stuff, now I think it's all right. The boys had a good time. Their yogurts and their shakes every day. Okay, we're on page 329. We got up to the idea of levar oifen haved. How do you do it? Right? We know what it is, avanira. You know why it has to be avanira. Why does the Aveda have to include also ava as opposed to just yira? What is the nature of ava that is an advantage over yira?
Yira is not necessarily coming from place of Avodah. It could be natural to someone.
Exactly. Ava demands change. Ava demands growth, and yira doesn't necessarily, right? The person could be naturally a law-abiding citizen. So if he's a law-abiding citizen and he grew up in Borough Park, that means he's going to keep Torah mitzvahs. If he's a law-abiding citizen in Nebraska, it means he votes on Tuesday. Okay. Mows his lawn, drives the speed limit. What else does he do? I don't know.
Pays his taxes.
Pays his taxes. He pays his taxes, right? I didn't even think of that. I live in Israel. Who even thought of that? Right? Pays his taxes. And every now and then he takes a trip to Indianapolis. Just
Visit the big city.
yeah, see the big city. He goes to the Indy 500.
That's for sure.
And he stands in the what's it called?
In the ring.
The ring, right? But, I had a friend who grew up in Indianapolis, and he remembers as a kid they would go there. Watch the colors fly by.
Who's your friend who grew up in Indianapolis?
His name in Indianapolis was Blaine, the Blaine family.
I know Blaine. Michael Blaine.
So he was Mark.
I wonder if that was
So
Michael's son.
Mark, I mean, he became Zvi Blobstein, because he changed his name back to the original name from Europe, but then he changed it again. I don't remember his name now. He has sort of a Hebraicized name now. And he works in the archives of the library in Hebrew University, works in the archives of the Frum stuff. He's an interesting guy. So Tzvi, we learned in Yeshiva together. So he was in Indianapolis. Blaine, that guy. It's funny, I remember his name was Blaine, because I never met him as Blaine. He was Blobstein when I was in Yeshiva.
Good memory.
But Blaine, Mark Blaine, but it's Tzvi. His wife, I remember, called him Mark, which I thought was funny, but I think they'd met.
Beforehand. Yeah, I know the Blaines. Not well. But
Yeah, I mean, I can't be too many families, right? The
Why'd
people-
you tell me we started 15 minutes late?
Well, we
haven't
weren't.
started yet.
We
What?
weren't. Well, why did he tell you?
Yeah,
Well, we are. We haven't started yet.
Oh, okay, all right, you were right. then,
We've been
Okay.
talking about
I'm
the
sorry.
people. There's a
I'm
riot.
sorry.
Actually, right now I can see because there's a little thing in the corner here of what's going on in Bangladesh. The people in Bangladesh are
Bangladesh?
rioting because they want us to start learning. They don't want us to talk about Indianapolis and Nebraska.
Indian no place.
It's fighting words, Doc.
I know, no, I remember my rabbi in Scranton, I know he wants to start, but I have to say this.
You can sit down when you say it, Doc.
It's
Nothing will
not
happen.
to share. Oh, I said it for the challenge rabbi when I lived in, I hate to admit it, Scranton, Pennsylvania, for 6 years. He was being.
Were you in the army then, or you were?
No, I was a civilian like you.
But you mean you chose to live in Scranton?
Yeah, isn't that
If
sad?
the army sent you, so
That's
then
what-
we would forgive you. But if you actually chose to live in
Chose-
Scranton, Pennsylvania,
Sorry to say I
okay,
chose.
say that.
Wedding, so this.
We love you anyway.
Thank
It's
you.
good that we heard about this now. You know, like Linus only shines the front of his shoes. Says because first impressions are what matter. Once you leave the room, they already have their impression of you, so it doesn't matter what your shoes are showing.
Makes sense.
So there you go. Yeah, sorry.
No, it's all right. So they went to Indianapolis to speak at the synagogue or JCC there. And people in Scranton thought that was the greatest place. Some of them would say this is the next best thing to living in Jerusalem.
What, Indianapolis or Scranton?
No, Scranton, yeah. So he
There was a big
comes-
yeshiva there.
There is.
Is still
It's an extension from Lakewood.
Lakewood, yeah.
Yeah, I can tell you stories about that too.
No, we don't want to go there.
No,
While
I
we're
won't
lear-
go there.
Not while we're learning Chassidus stuff.
Okay, you're right. Anyway, I'll just finish this thing. So he gets up, and I think then he was implying that he actually went there for an interview, but so he decided against it, and he said, Scranton is amazing. I was in Indian no place. And I'm thinking to myself, how could you say that Scranton is better than Indianapolis?
There you
It's
go.
unbelievable.
There you go.
Anyway, I don't know, that probably wasn't.
Scranton.
You been?
Scranton near Wilkes-Barre, right? So
That's right.
So Lubavitch Yeshiva in Wilkes-Barre.
And, yeah, and there's a big now Lubavitch in Scranton.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That'll show those guys from Lakewood.
that's right. Sorry,
Okay.
I couldn't help myself.
Now everybody can leave. Levar Ofen Aveda. We learned that our Aveda affects Atzis. We learned that Aveda is Avin Yira. And now how? Levar, and this is the more famous part of this mimer. Levar Ofen Aveda de Bevadatem es Availokechem. To explain the Ofen, the fashion, the way of this Aveda. So the pasuk says "V'vadim es v'alokechem," and then the Rebbe says the pasuk tells you how to do avodah. Mamshich b'kosef. In order to teach you how to do avodah, the pasuk continues and says, "Leisi mishakela v'akad." Don't be a mishakela v'akad. Mishakela is someone, of course, who loses a baby. Akad is someone who is barren. Tehine. And this is based, as you can see in footnote 53, on the Alter Rebbe in Torah or Mittler Rebbe in Teres Chaim. the next little piece. Akara, he she'eni yoledis banim. Akara is someone who doesn't give birth to children. What is that in Pneumius? The kaila mides hava v'yira. What are the mides hava in Europe? Ben or bat. Right? Bat and Tanya. So someone who doesn't give birth is someone who doesn't give birth to the emotions of love and fear. Told us the Hisbeinunus. What are Avanira? The offspring of the Hisbeinunus, of the intellectual contemplation of the greatness of God. That's Tanya, Gimels, that says in the footnote. Sha'ava hi bechinas ben, v'yira hi bechinas bas. Generally, the difference between ben and bas is active or passive. The power of women is penima, it's passivity. The power of men is going out and doing, function. So ben, it's ava is mitzvahs haseh, and yira is mitzvahs leis haseh. And women are chayiv in all mitzvahs leis haseh. When you say women are pater from certain mitzvahs, only from mitzvahs haseh shezman grama. Mitzvahs leis haseh shezman grama, so they're chayiv. Right? I mean, it's no chiddush that women are chayiv hilchas Shabbos. The chiddush is they're chayiv kiddush. Why? Zohar v'shamor, right? Because Zohar and Shamor were said together, so they're also chayiv in the positive commandments of Shabbos. But that's a limud, right? But the fact that women are chayiv in the Shamor of Shabbos, that's pashat. There's no difference between men and women relative to negative commandments. Only positive time-bound commandments, right? Why? Well, because not doing something is, anybody can not do it regardless of whether time is an issue or not an issue. Mishakela. So who's mishakela? If akara is someone who hasn't given birth to Avan Yira, so then mishakela must be someone who's given birth, but they lost it somehow. Mishakela hishi aledes Ava v'Yira, someone who gives birth to Avan Yira, elashein lem kiyum, but they don't last. Now the Rebbe is going to explain all this. Valzeh ba hatzivui, and relative to this comes the tzivui. Now in the beginning of the Maimah we asked, is this a commandment or is this a promise? So we said it's really both. So we'll see how it still is ultimately a promise also. But that being said, right now the Rebbe is learning it as a tzivui, meaning the Torah is telling us how to reach a state of avanira. Don't be a mishakela or an akara. Don't do that. Now, how do I not do that? So that's what the Rebbe is going to explain. Don't be a mishakela v'akara. Again, simple pshat in the pasuk was and you won't be this, right? Meaning the promise of children. Now the Rebbe is learning it as serve the Eibishter. How? Don't be a mishakela v'akara. She's beinunus, that a person's beinunus, a person's contemplation of reality, of elokus. Tzarech liyos must be ba'ifin, in a fashion, in a way. Shetia mizeh ledas amides. It'll give birth to mides. And not only does it give birth to a temporary state of inspiration, because that's not enough. Ela v'amides yub'kiyum, they'll last. Inspiration doesn't. That's why inspiration is not of great importance. Sha'az tia aveda de v'yavadatim esavayalokechem. Then the aveda of v'yavadatim esavayalokechem, you'll serve God. Kid boy will be as it should be. Okay, so that's the headline. It'll be your inyan. So now let's explain all this. So the Rebbe just said an interesting thing. V'yavadatim esavayalokechem. Ubeirach eslachma esemecha. V'asiresi machna mikirbecha. That's the first pasuk. The second pasuk comes to tell us how to do the first pasuk. How to do v'yavadatim esavayalokechem. How do you do it? Leisa mishakela v'akara ba'artzecha. You shouldn't be a mishakela v'akara. What does that mean in Pneumius? That your hisbeinunus should be such that it brings about a lasting love and fear. So how do I do that? Okay. So the Rebbe is now going to explain there's two different levels of akara. There's two different levels of barrenness in kedusha, in Pneumius. Ubir. Okay, now again, you look at footnote 55. So the Rebbe says that you can see something like this in Torah or in Torah's Chaim. Also Order Torah, which is the Alter Rebbe, the Mikkel Rebbe, and the Tzemach Tzedek. Ubir inyan hine, ba'akara she'eno yeledes, in Gashmias, a woman who can't give birth, yesh beis bechinas. There's two different levels of a woman who is barren. Bechina Aleph, the first level, Shafilu base Vlad, base matron, which we would call in English a uterus, even the house of the child, the base matron, the house of motherhood, right? Ein law doesn't have the physical apparatus necessary to give birth. Right? There can be a woman who they get married and they're not having children, and they go get checked out, and it turns out that there's a physical issue, and so this woman can't give birth. Such a thing. Hainu, she'ein la kli kibul lekabel herayon. She doesn't have the vessel to accept pregnancy, letzarach haleda, for the purpose of giving birth. Okay. Now, in Chassidus, that's we're going to see in the Panemius, it's going to be the base Vlad. Okay, but it could be anything, obviously, physically. But it's going to be the base Vlad. The inability to accept pregnancy. Okay. What's that in Aveda? Vinyane ba'Aveda. Base Vlad, the uterus. What's the uterus? The place where the child is nurtured and grows until ultimately the child can come into a state of revelation in the world as a separate being. Okay. What's that in Panemius? Kail hispailus sichlis. We'll come back to that in 1 second. Intellectual excitement. She'al yoda, that through it, tia heilodas hamides bizgalus libe. As a result of intellectual excitement, there will be a birth of the emotion in a revealed way in his heart. Keep reading a little. We're going to come back to Hispailus Sichlis. I want you to see the general idea. What is that? But first, let's see the equation, and we can explain the equation. Vakara she'ein la base vlad. So then this barren woman who has no base flood, which now is not a barren woman who doesn't have a base flood. We're now talking about a person who doesn't have the intellectual excitement to give birth to midas, to give birth to a revealed feeling of love and fear. Perushay, what does that mean? Shalezu bilvad, that not only she'ein loy ava v'yir bizgalas libay, not only does he not have love and fear in a revealed way in his heart, and what's that called? Shezeu inyan timtum halev, that the heart is all stopped up, that the heart isn't expressing the emotions properly. Elo she'ein lo yafilu hispailus sichlis, doesn't even have hispailus sichlis, intellectual excitement. Shezeu inyan timtum hamayach, that the brain is stopped up. Oh, okay. So now, simply, without in an untechnical, I don't know, is there such a word? Untechnical way? Okay, we just made up a word. In an untechnical way, so you would say that the intellectual excitement, if I'm excited about an idea, so then obviously that idea is going to become much more part of my everyday conscious reality, so I'm going to connect to that idea and connect to everything that idea entails, and of course that connection is called midas. That's what midas are. Midas are a connection to something. I love it. I'm awe of it. Midas are all about my connection to something outside of myself. Okay, so that makes sense. If I'm not particularly excited about an idea, so then I'm not going to have any emotional connection to the idea. Okay, fine, idea, good. Okay, I learned that page of Gemara. Now I'm done. I can cross it off the list. Right? Or I learned that idea. Okay, that's a nice word. Oh, nice word. Right? Okay. Whereas if I get excited about an idea, so obviously that idea is going to affect me more. That makes sense. Okay. Lack of excitement about elokus, about an idea about elokus. Okay, we're going to talk about why I might not get excited. That's the next part. But first I have to understand what that hispailus sichlis is. But on a more technical level, and this also obviously helps us understand on a much deeper level, the question arises, and it's a perfectly reasonable question, how can it possibly be that intellect can affect emotions? They are two completely different worlds. Intellect is cold, distant, calm, cool, calm, and collected. Right? That's intellect. Distant, objective reality. Emotion is passionate, hot, bubbly, right? Subjective reality. How can it possibly be that those two have anything to do with each other? Right? How can it be that intellect can affect emotion? Now, I understand it's the same person, right? But they're two completely different states of reality, so they have nothing to do with each other. Oh, well, that's not exactly true. Because interestingly enough, both intellect and emotion contain within them their opposite. In other words, there's a reality called meichin shebamidas, the intellect of emotions, right, which is easier to understand. That's why we'll talk about that one first. And there's also something called midas shebemeichin, the emotion of thought, which is what allows you to get excited about an idea. Right? Okay, because why am I getting excited about an idea? That's an emotion. It's not an intellectual response. That's an emotional response. Oh, well, because there's something called midas shebemeichin. So now, it's easier to understand first meichin shebemidas. We do know that all of the spheres are incorporated one in the other, right? So not only are the 7 spheres of midas incorporated one in the other, which we talk about during spheres Aimer, right? Chesed shebechesed, gvur shebechesed, etc. But there's also midas shebemeichin and meichin shebemidas, right? All 10 are incorporated in a state of unity. Okay, so now what's meichin shebemidas? Okay, now what you and I call intellect, human intellect, animals don't have. Animals cannot multiply 5 times 5. Right? Okay. You can train an animal to hit the ground 25 times when you tell him that formula, but he doesn't understand what 5 times 5 is. He's just trained to hit the ground 25 times with his hoof. When you go, okay, Mr. Ed, what's 5 times 5? And he goes, because he couldn't really talk. It was a fake. I know, Doc, I wrecked your whole life, but he couldn't really talk. Right?
Right out of my brain.
Okay. Right? Okay, so, but animals obviously have intellect. They have some level of intellect, right? Because, I mean, anybody who ever has seen or had any relationship with a pet, a dog especially, I mean, cats also, but cats, relationship is a funny word to use relative to a cat, right? But a dog will, a dog will learn all sorts of things, and the dog will learn how to go to the door and scratch the door when he wants to go outside, and you say, want to go for a walk, and he'll run to the cupboard and get his leash, and obviously there's intellect there. He knows what's going on. Okay, so what is that exactly? So there's 2 different levels of intellect of the Nefesh Habahamis. There's, relative to you and I, there's intellect of the Nefesh Habahamis, which is what you and I will call seichel anoshi, human intellect, which is unique to humans, right? And that's the intellect that can understand very, very sophisticated ideas and end up making smartphones and spaceships. Okay. There's also an intellect of the emotion. I mean, the intellect of the Nefesh Habahamis, which is the intellect of the emotions of the Nefesh Habahamis, because the Nefesh Habahamis, be'ikr, is emotions. It has intellect. And that's what you and I call seichel anoshi, human intellect, fine. But the midas of the Nefesh Habahamis also have something called intellect, right? And that's why animals can think. They can't math problems, but they can think. And you and I share a very similar intellect with them in this context. There's an intellect that we have that they don't have. There's an intellect that we have that we share with them. And what's that? The ability to come to the basic conclusion, shezeh tovli. I want this. It's good for me. I'm interested in it. I want to be connected to it. Where's that happening? It's not an intellectual decision. That's an emotional decision. I mean, that decision is happening in the emotions. So the animal has the ability to decide zeh tovli. Right? Okay, so therefore he wants it. So he can even learn how to scratch at the door. Because shezeh tovli, he wants to go to the bathroom, and he's only allowed to do it outside. So he'll go scratch the door, and they'll let him outside. Okay, he can figure that out. Right? And he does figure that out. And there's other things that he'll come to the conclusion, shezeh lo tovli. So that conclusion, so to speak, the maskana, that now in the animal there's not a tremendous amount of give and take intellectually in order to come to that decision. In a human, there might be. In a human, there might be a lot of intellectual give and take before I come to the point where in the making of my midos, I say, okay, zetov, li. Now, you and I can even come to a point where that can say zetov. And it doesn't have to be tov li, it can just be tov. Humans can do that too. Right? Okay. But animals can't. Animals are tov li. Okay, now, animals can be very clever, right? The fox can outsmart the farmer and get the chicken. Right? But because he's got an incredibly strong emotional desire for that chicken, right? And he figures out how to express that. Right? Okay, so he can be clever, but that he's still not doing math problems. It's just that's not a fox can't do a math problem. But there's something called mechin shebamidas, and what's mechin shebamidas? The decision shezet tovli. How do I decide what it is I want to connect to, what it is I want to love, and what it is I want to be afraid of? Where's that decision happening? How does an animal know that maybe he doesn't want to be next to the lion? That's not an intellectual decision, right? Okay, well, it is on some level. Well, yeah, on the level that animals have intellect. I mean, it's very clear to him. He's going to come to the conclusion, shazel lo tovli, right? And he's going to run away. But that conclusion is not an it's not an intellectual conclusion like you and I use intellect. Although you and I do make that same, so to speak, intellectual decision relative to certain things. Except it's all happening in midos. It's not happening mamish in intellect per se. Because it can happen in an animal, and an animal doesn't have what you and I call intellect. Right? What you and I call intellect. Human intellect. Yeah? Seder? So that level of intellect is called mechin shebamidas. And you and I have it also. Oh. So that's one aspect of how it is that mechin and midas can have a relationship. But there's another one, and that's what the Rebbe is talking about. Midas shebamechin. What's that? I can get intellectually excited about an idea. I can get excited about an idea. I can feel a connection to an idea. And that's happening in my intellect before it penetrates into my emotions. Right? Oh, that excitement, which is midas shebamechin, is what allows the mechin to ultimately be drawn down into midas. And what's the path? Mechin, midas shebamechin, mechin shebamidas, midas. Those four levels is what happens in us. When you get connected to something, right? I mean, something of worth, not connected on an animal level, connected on a sophisticated human level. There's things we connect to on an animal level. Okay, so that's just midas. It's just nefesh ba'am is connecting to something. Okay, but if I want to affect the midas of my nefesh ba'am and get those midas to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so what do I have to do? So first of all, I have to contemplate the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and come to the realization that he's worthy of that love. But that intellectual understanding is not enough in order to bring about an emotion that's revealed in my heart. There has to also be midei shebamechin, an excitement about that idea. If I don't find learning about HaKadosh Baruch Hu exciting, I will never bring about any emotional connection to him. That doesn't mean I won't appreciate the fact that he's amazing and incredible and worthy of my love. But there'll be no real love. Why? It's all just dry and unfeeling. It's all just intellectual. Right? So I learn about God because I have to. There are people who find ideas in Chassidus uninteresting. I always find that quite astounding, but there are all sorts of people who like listening. They'll go get a rugala in the middle. No, but he's Chassidus Yid now, so you can say that. Again, at that point, I guess he didn't find Chassidus more interesting than a rugala, right? Because he was willing to forego his Chassidus to go get his rugala. Right? It's an old story way back, but he made it in the end, right? Okay. So what do I find? Right, the story of the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe walked by two Chassidim learning Chassidus Shabbos in the morning. And each had a cup of tea, and he walked by and he heard ah. So he turned around and asked, "Is the ah for the Chassidus or the tea?" Okay, right? Now it could, okay, this is a whole Febregan, right? I mean, it could theoretically be for both, right? Sort of, right? Sort of. As long as the for the T is controlled. Right? I mean, you can go for the tea because you're cold or your throat's sore or whatever, and you drink the tea. That felt good. Okay, fine, felt good. But the real hopefully, is for the idea in the minor, and that is his pailu sichlis. And without that, learning Chassidus isn't going to affect me. Why? Well, because there's no connection between Meichin and Midas. There has to be a connection between Meichin and Midas, and if there's no Midas shebemeichin, which is called these pailu sichlis, so then there's not going to be any Midas Bechlal. So again, Meichin, Midas shebemeichin, Meichin shebemidas, Midas. That's the pathway to get from intellectual understanding to emotional reaction. Which makes sense. That's why they can connect to each other. So if part of that, if there's a link missing, so nothing's going to happen. And what's that link? He's pailu sichlis. So why might it be missing? So I was going to explain next. Say it, we can go further. Now, the Rebbe is going to take out your kishkas in this part of the Maimer. I'm just warning you. If you're sensitive, this is like this. They put warnings on everything now. All right? So if you're sensitive, this is going to affect you, which is good.
Chassidus bekamut kvar. Chassidus bekamut kvar. Little red warning.
All right, so okay. Fourth line. Base Vlad Kayal, his pailu sichlis shal yoda tia hiladas of midas bisgalas libe. What will bring about the birth of the midas in a revealed way in his heart? His pailu sichlis, which connects. It's the midas of meichin, which allows meichin to affect midas. Vakara shein la beis vlad perushay. What does that mean? This is the first level of Vakara. Shalezu bavad shein la aver v'yir v'izgaz liba. I mean, that certainly there's no children. There's obviously no children. There's not even the apparati necessary to give birth to children. What's that in Pneumius? It's pailu sichlis. You should find God interesting. If you don't find God interesting, you're not going to have a relationship with God, right? Okay, well that makes sense, doesn't it? Shazowi and Timtum Alev. That's Timtum Alev is when I don't feel anything. Ella she'ein lo efili is pailu sichli is not even intellectual excitement. Shazowi and Timtum Amayach. Okay. Vasiba lezeh. Why might it be that a person doesn't find the Eibishter particularly interesting? He mipnei she'ein a kli kibul, because he's not a receptacle. Okay, that's also in Gashmias, but also in Ruchnias. What does that mean? Why is he not a receptacle? Liesa kli mole, because he's a full vessel. Ubamidas basav adam, and in physical reality, kli mole, a full vessel, in a machzik, doesn't hold anything. If this cup is full of water, I can't put more water in it. The only thing I can put water in is an empty vessel. But a full vessel can't hold more water. Now, interestingly enough, in terms of intellect, that's not the case, right? Even though we're talking about intellect, but we're talking about, we're obviously using this mushal. But intellect is the one thing that you and I experience, well, to a certain degree, emotions also, but it's more obvious in intellect. The more you understand, the more you can understand. The more ideas that are in your head, the more ideas you can put in your head, which is exactly the opposite of beer in the cup. Now, the more beer in the cup, the less ideas you can put in your head. We know that. Actually, I guess it should be the less beer in the cup, the less ideas you can put in your head, right? Because the beer's in your head, right? Okay, but the intellect is interesting that way, right? It's not that you fill up. Adrabah, the more you understand, the more you're able to understand, right? If we don't understand much about physics, so we can't learn very much about physics. Whereas if someone does understand a lot about physics, so someone could come in here and do equations on the board and just, blow the guy away. Say, wow, that's amazing. And those of us who don't understand physics will be looking at it and say, okay, I guess it's pretty amazing, but I don't understand the thing you said. Right? I'm sure it's amazing. right? I mean, you look like a smart guy, and you said it with an English accent, so it must be must be that you know what you're talking about. Okay, so kli malena machzik, that's in Gashmias, and what's this person full of? Let's see. Tehine kasher adamu kli male. When a person's full, he's a full vessel, and what does that mean? The Rebbe gets so heavy here. And it's really astounding what the Rebbe is about to say. Hainu shu male miritzena shalei. What's he full of? His own desires. To put it in a slightly different term, his own agenda. Which is really, really what the Rebbe means, as you see as we go further. Yes, it's ritzenes, but what's an agenda? What's what I want? Right? So he has his own ritzenes. He's full of his own desires. So now look what the Rebbe says. Loimi boy. What's a loimi boy from the Gemara? We're counting on you, Ari. You're in the higher class here. Ooh, we're going to bring it back to my class. Ooh, I can tell Rabbi Silberg, you're in trouble now. Lomi boy, it's not necessary, right? Lomi boy, ... But afilu this, right? The Gemara will say it's not even necessary to teach you this. Why? Because that's obvious, right? But even this. Sometimes the Gemara will describe a Mishnah as loimi boy ka'amar. It's a loimi boy Mishnah. Right, it's not necessary, right? I mean, the first case is necessary. Not only the first case, even the second case, right? Okay, so that you'll ask, well, why teach me the first case? If just teach me the second case, and I'll extrapolate back to the first case, which is generally how a Mishnah will be written. Okay, there are some Mishnahs that are written loimi boy ka'amar. Why? Kacha. Just deal with it. There'll be a Mishnah that will have the first case, even though theoretically the first case is not necessary. Okay, so loimi boy. Loimi boy, it's not necessary to say, meaning obviously, that what if his ritzenus or the ritzenus of the Yetzer Hara, so that's obviously going to get in his way. Shehemer ritzenus l'dvar masurim, that they are the desire for things that are osir. So obviously that's a desire, that's a problem. Or yafilu, even ritzenus the nefesh b'hamis, or even the desire for the nefesh b'hamis l'dvar mamutarim. Right? Because there's a clear distinction between Yetzer Hara and Nefesh Bahamis. Obviously, the source of the Yetzer Hara is the Nefesh Bahamis, but not every expression of the Nefesh Bahamis is Yetzer Hara. Right? The Nefesh Bahamis could be very interested in eating unbelievably kosher food. It's nice. That's not doing a favor, right? But he has a taiva for something kosher, right? So he's busy eating rugelach that are so kosher, they say amen to your bracha, but he's stuffing his face with rugelach. So that's nefesh b'amis. That's not Yetzer Hara, but it's nefesh b'amis. Why is he eating these rugelach? Well, his nefesh elokis wants to sit there and stuff his face with rugelach? No, his nefesh b'amis, nefesh elokis wants to go do something of use. Okay, his nefesh b'amis is sitting here and enjoying the physical experience and the physical sensation of the taste of these juicy, fresh out of the oven rugelach. Okay. And they're good. They're good, nice. Right? Okay. So there's there's the Yetzer Hara, which is a Veiras. So obviously that's nowhere relative to a relationship with the Eibishter. There's also the Nefesh Bahamis, which is desires for Devarim Mutarim, which the Alter Rebbe calls in Tanya what? The desire for something that's also is called Shedi Nuchroin, right? Non-Jewish demons. And the desire for something mutter is Shedin Yehudoin, is Jewish demons, right? Meaning Baruch Hashem, it's kosher, but still the person's, all he's thinking about, he's sitting there and learning a Maimer Chassidus, thinking about, I hope there's Rogalach left. Okay, so that's not coming from the Nefesh Elokis. He's not thinking, oh gee, I hope there's bacon left, God forbid. That's a little worse, right? It's either. But that's still going to keep him, ultimately, if that's where his head's at, that's where his being is at. So that's going to keep him from a state of love. That even though they are Devarim Mutarim, they're mutter, have a big badats of the Eidach Haredah stamped on them. Harei taiva aleim, but the taiva for them, he became a shade, and the Rebbe says it's like the demon Mishedin Yehudoyin. It's the Jewish demon, Al Kol Panim. Tanya. Right, look at footnote 59, Tanya Pereches. Okay. Now look what the Rebbe says, though. This is really astounding. So it's not only the taivas, the ratzon nefesh abam of the Yitzhara, and then the ratzon of the nefesh abam is, look at the next line. Ela filu, even ratzonos the nefesh elokis, even desires of the nefesh elokis. Hainu ratzonos the kedusha, holy ratzonos. Now change the word ratzon to agenda, and you get it. A person has an agenda in his relationship with the Eibishter, what he wants to do in the context of that relationship, what he wants that relationship to be about, what he wants his Torah mitzvahs to be. Okay, so that's the Ritzainus of the Nefesh Elokis that aren't necessarily in line with what the Eibishter wants. Now, the Nefesh Elokis, the Gadol is in line with the Nefesh, right? So here we're not saying the Nefesh Elokis doesn't necessarily want this. Be'etzim, it doesn't want this, right? If it's something that the Eibishter doesn't want, even though it's an Indian in Kedusha. He doesn't want me to do this now, he wants me to do something else, right? So I can be, if I'm frum at the expense of someone else, right? So on a certain level, you say, well, that's a desire of the Nefesh Elokis. Well, it isn't really, because the Nefesh Elokis obviously wants me to do what God wants, and what God wants is for me to take care of this person and not worry about my own Yiddishkeit at this particular point, right? Okay. A slight, an example of that you don't hold by the Erev. Okay, that's good. Your wife holds by the Erev because that's the only way she can come to shul with the kids. I mean an Erev that's a real Erev. I don't mean an Erev that's not a real Erev, right? Okay, so here in Yerushalayim, there's a real Erev. Okay, so lots of people don't hold by it. Why? Well, why? Yes, I don't need to hold by it. It's convenience, but I don't need that convenience. Okay, so who does need that convenience? My wife will need that convenience, because if my wife wants to come to shul, especially Parshas Zocher, the only way she's going to be able to come to shul is by pushing the carriage in the Erev. Now there's a real Erev. It's not a problem. It's real. Okay. Now how about going home, and it's uphill? Right? What might the unsophisticated person think? Well, I'm very frum and I don't hold by the Erev, so my wife will push the carriage up the hill. She holds by the Erev and I don't. The normal, healthy person will say, Shalom Bayis is more important than my chumrah relative to the Erev, and I'll push the carriage up the hill. Right? That's the healthy person. The unhealthy person will make his wife be a Shabbos goy for his Yiddishkeit. So that's not healthy. Right? It's a ratzon of the Nefesh Elokis, right? I'm frum. I don't carry. Okay, that's fine. No problem. So what does that mean? That means and that'll entail a certain amount of sacrifice on your part, meaning what? It's a 10-minute walk to shul. Well, you could theoretically, take a little sihiye or something and learn it on the way to shul. But you don't carry, so you can't do that. You could say Shnai Mikra Vechad Targum, and you're part of Shnai Mikra Vechad Targum on your way to shul. It doesn't take a lot of intellectual energy to say that, right? Okay, so you could save yourself 10 minutes of time when you get to shul by doing something that you have to do at shul. Some people say korbanos on their way. Now some people memorize it. Okay, fine, whatever. But the person doesn't do that. Why? Because they don't hold by the Erev. Okay, good. Going home. So going home, maybe it's more, it's better. What are you going to be makel about, and what are you going to be machmir about? You're going to be machmir on shalom bayis and makel on your chumrah about the Erev, or are you going to be machmir on the Erev and makel on shalom bayis? Oh, maybe it's best to be machmir on shalom bayis and makel on the Erev. It's not makel on the Erev, there's an Erev, right? You just don't usually use it. Okay, that's reasonable. You don't have to use it. Okay. When a lot of Lubavitchers don't hold by Eruvim here in Eretz Yisrael, because the Alter Rebbe Shita in the Erev is much different than everybody else, and there's very few places that have an Erev that's Lafi the Alter Rebbe Shita. Okay, but when does everybody hold by it? Bochrim, who go out Masiba Shabbos with stuff for kids all over the country. What do? They carry stuff for the kids, candies for the kids, and things the kids can take home in the parsha. What's more important? those kids' Yiddishkeit or your Chomer with the Erev? Those kids' Yiddishkeit is obviously much more important, right? Okay, so the Bachrim are carrying on the way to Mitzrayim, Shabbos afternoon. Did they carry on the way to Shul? No. But they'll carry in the afternoon. Okay. But if I can't do that, so where's that coming from? My agenda in my Yiddishkeit. What does God want? What do I care what God wants? I've got my Yiddishkeit to worry about. Oh, so that's my Ratzon. I mean, for Lubavitchers, this wasn't difficult. This was actually the greatest thing that ever happened. But for people for some people, this was very, very difficult. The idea that during COVID, davening in minyanim was, at the beginning, so that, when they answered all this stuff, so then you couldn't daven in a minyan, there were no minyanim, right? So some people were going to great lengths, and the Rabbanim were saying that, so people shouldn't daven in minyanim. I mean, once people figured out what was really going on, so wait, hold on a second, this might not be necessary. But it took a long time to figure that all out, right? So at the beginning, when there were no, people, there were no minyanim, so if you were lucky enough to live in an area where you could figure out how to do a minyan by people standing outside, okay, so that there were a lot of those, and the people actually got to know their neighbors, right? Because they were davening with their neighbors. And there's a lot of shuls that were COVID shuls that have remained, right? The neighbors made a shul because there wasn't a main shul, so they made a shul with everybody standing outside in someone's yard. And then it turned into a shul. Those shuls are still shuls. They ended up, finding a building, whatever they did. So, but the idea of the fact that there weren't minyanim. So, okay, let's say the Rabbanim. Let's say it was different in every book. The Rabbanim paskin, you can't go to shul. It's dangerous. Okay, so am I going to be meiser nefesh to go to shul because I have to daven in a minyan? Well, if the Rabbanan said I'm not allowed to daven in a minyan, so then I shouldn't daven in a minyan, right? But I can't stand davening. I have to have, for Lubavitchers, this was the best thing that ever happened. We don't have to go to minyan. This was just so wonderful for us. Yeah, we could just learn. It was those few months were pushed by me. It was Gan Eden. It was unbelievable because Mayanot basically shut down because everybody left. At a certain point, they said, "Okay, the airport is going to close in 3 days." So most of the guys here left. I mean, reasonable. What are they going to do, guys? Sit here? Anyway. So a bunch of guys left, and so we started a Zoom yeshiva. We were on Zoom at 4 p.m. Israel time. That's when Chassidus was. Chassidus was 4 p.m., I think. Is that right? Yeah, I think Chassidus was 4 p.m. and Nigla was like 5:30.
For the guys in America?
Yeah, for the guys in America. Something like that. And also, we had people in Europe. Remember Jeremy was here in the summer? Jeremy Coleman from England? The photographer. Just the sweetest guy. So how did he become a Mayanot addict? The Zoom classes. So personally, for me, that was the best thing I've had in a long time. We made a mikveh on our back porch, and so we had our own mikveh, and it was good enough for men, not for women, obviously, but it was a good enough mikveh for men. We had a mikveh, and so I could get up, 8 a.m, take a shower, put on a bathrobe, walk into the mikveh. Sit and learn Chassidus as long as I wanted. Daven. I had to start teaching at 4 p.m. It was like being retired. It was fantastic. It was no minyan. Don't have to worry about a minyan. You're in the middle of a mimer, and it's time to daven. Okay, it's 9:30, 10 o'clock. Well, I know, but we're not stopping now. Let's keep going here. Oh, I see what retirement is. It's the best. It's the best. That's why the Rebbe won't let us retire. The Rebbe says an amazing thing here. Even the Ritzenis of the Nefesh Elokis, even if a person has their own agenda in their Yiddishkeit, what's that? They're a kli maleh she'eino machzik. They're not going to love God because they're too busy loving themselves. Now, what are they loving? A certain good thing. Hainu Ritzenis de Kedusha. Hine, imu malei va'asuk b'ritzenis shalei. If he's full and involved in his own Ritzenis, again, his own agenda. So what does that mean? Leimer shaveda zu yesh chushba. This aveda, he has a chush for it. Feels it, he connects to it. This aveda I like. V'aveda zu Avodah zu who rates it. This avodah he wants. Avodah zu ain't rates. And this avodah he doesn't want, and for some reason they put this in Yiddish. I don't know why. The avodah vilir and avodah when the avodah vilir nip. This avodah he wants. This avodah he doesn't want. Same thing in Yiddish. There's certain things he connects to. Someone who loves learning, okay, but he doesn't like mitzvayim. Okay, she's called mitzvayim still, right? Okay, he loves mitzvayim, doesn't like learning. Okay, so still has to learn. Azayu kli malish in a machzik. She'ena tefes emes b'meichei. Now the Rebbe says something fascinating. He's not going to grasp the truth in his brain, v'sichla, in his intellect, in order that he'll have intellectual excitement. So the Rebbe just said something astounding. Not only will this affect the ability of intellect to affect midos, he won't come to a full understanding of the idea because he's getting in the way. That's really interesting, right? That's what I just said, right? He's not going to understand the idea fully. Right? Now, think about that in the extreme case. And we've all experienced this, and we've experienced it ourselves, but we also have experienced it in other people that we see in a classroom, whether we're the teacher or another student in a classroom, someone who's extremely tarud emotionally. Just there's a lot of emotional turmoil. Now, it might be existential, or it's just today. It's just, there's just a lot going on today. How successful is he going to be at understanding the ideas he's trying to learn? He's going to be there's so much noise in his head from himself that he's not going to be able to focus on the idea. Right? Now, the Rebbe's talking about that in a much more subtle way, but that's in the very obvious way. Right? There's certain, it's some in our own lives we'll experience sometimes. You'll sit down to learn, but there's just something that's bothering you and you can't, it's hard to concentrate. Right? Or someone who just existentially, they have so much turmoil in their life, emotionally, they're going through, certain issues that they have to work out, and so they just don't have time in their being to concentrate on an idea. There's just so much other noise going on that they find it very hard to focus on something. Or, that's where it's very, very obvious, or in a much more subtle way, which is what the Rebbe is talking about, if I have a certain agenda, and we see this, it's not so subtle. You see it in, how people present the news, right? Everything's an agenda, right? I'll understand every event in accordance with the agenda as opposed to understanding it objectively, right? Okay. So I'll have a hard time understanding the Torah fully if there's certain aspects of this idea that challenge what I would like things to, how I would like things to be. So I'll somehow block out that idea. I won't allow myself to understand it fully because it's too challenging to me, which happens. Right? Okay. So the Rebbe says not only is the Ispailu Siflis, the lack thereof, bringing about a situation where I might not be able to translate the intellectual understanding into an emotional connection. It's going to affect my intellectual understanding. I want to understand it fully because I'm getting in the way. My own inyanim, as opposed to just understand the idea. This is what it says, and that's what it says. Right? That can happen often just when a person's learning Gemara. It's not their own emotional things. They want the Gemara to say something because that'll be the answer they assume the Gemara is going to say. And they read that into the Gemara. Well, that's not what the Gemara is saying. Read it. Okay. Or someone has a basic pshat, and this will happen with chavrusas, right? Someone has a basic pshat, and then the Gemara says a line. So your pshat reads that line much more easily than my pshat, but I'll fight for my pshat and try to force my pshat into those words. That's crummy intellect, right? Right, but why am I doing that? Well, because I don't want to give up on my pshat, because I was having such hana from my pshat, like I was explaining everything so nicely, and now all of a sudden something happened. Right? If I'm truly interested in the truth, what'll I do? Throw my pshat out the window and accept yours, because yours is explaining that line much better. That might be very hard for me to do at first. Hopefully not in the end, but at first. Why? I have my own agenda in this sugya. I want the sugya to go a certain way because that's what I thought it was doing. Okay, so that's going to stop me from understanding the sugya. I don't want the psak to be kach v'kach. I'd rather it be something else. Okay, well, sorry, read the words. Let me figure out how I can turn the words into something else. Okay. Say, ispailu sichlis. We'll go weiter on Sunday. Have an amazing Shabbos.
Thank you.
This mimer keeps getting